All right, we are getting ready to start. Thank you all for joining us, whether in person or online. This is what we call Talkback, an opportunity to engage with our proclaimer for the morning, to ask some further questions, to go a little bit deeper, to get inside the head a little bit, right, of the proclaimer for the hour. My name is Reverend Tara Gibbs. We have here with us our very own senior minister, Reverend Dr. Benjamin Boswell, who did a fantastic job today. Can we just give him a round of applause and thank God?
Thank you.
For his message today.
Thank you.
Especially because, knowing he had to preach, we somehow got him back from London. I know it was quite a struggle.
I was there doing missionary work. It was very hard.
It was a work trip.
Very hard.
Of course it was a work trip, right?
Religion is almost dead, especially Christianity in Europe. So I was there, I was preaching, no one was listening. The churches are all empty. They're filled with tourists.
I mean, when you were trying to preach in a couple of pubs, I don't think that was the best.
Yeah, Jesus said, go where the sinners are. And so I like to spend my time with the sinners in the pubs, yeah.
Well, very quick, how was the weather, though? I think that's why they were in the pub.
The weather was good.
Actually good.
We had good weather. Good weather.
All right, I've got a few questions here. If another question comes to your mind and we got time, I'd love for you just to wave that and I can get that to you or give you the microphone. But I'll start with what we have. And actually, this is my own question out of just pure curiosity, especially after a conversation with one of our other associate ministers, Reverend Carey. We were thinking about just the process and preparation for a message like this. This is a well-known kind of iconic text, right? The phrase is used in other contexts. I mean, you got Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower and so many other contexts. But then this is a text where Jesus gives the explanation. So why are you preaching?
Exactly.
This is one that preachers don't have to do. Jesus already did the work for you. So tell us a little bit about your process, your preparing for a message like this.
I just got up and said whatever came to my mind. No, of course not.
You'd still be talking.
How do you approach this? I mean, my approach to the parables of Jesus is to try to think through how they were preached to me as a child and do the opposite. That's my beginning. As I know that they were misinterpreted, and that I know that through Christian history, because of my general theological position, that through Christian history they were often misinterpreted. And part of that is because Christians have been in power and in control and used the Bible to justify their position in society. And so all these parables, just like all the stories of the Bible, have been interpreted in ways to justify Christian supremacy and European power and Western dominance. So I try to start by turning back to what was it like for the average hearer in first century Judea to hear this for the first time. I want to start there. So I want to imagine myself as a first century average common person roaming around Galilee and happened to see Jesus telling this story in a boat. What would I have thought about Jesus? I said that line about how I probably would be like, why is he telling us what we already know? It'd be like somebody coming in and explaining to you how to turn on your car. You'd be like, okay, so you put your key in. Now we don't even have keys. You press the button. The car turns on. And why are you telling us this, Jesus? We all know that, right? So the story seems very common and probably would have seemed, this one particularly, would have seemed very boring to the average hearer. The last thing I would ever want to be is boring. So I try to avoid that, but I wanted us to all feel what the first century listener would have felt like. Why is he talking about this? This is very commonplace, very plain, and try to get into that feeling. And then to see, okay, what's the point then, right? If parables are to arrest us and to tease us towards action, to subvert the status quo, to change things, what's really going on here? Where's the bite? Where's the edge, right? Where's the teeth of this parable? And I think for me, it came when I realized that Jesus is adapting, right? He's making a change, and he's moving into telling parables now at this point in his gospel, 13 chapters in. We don't know how long that is. It could have been years of his life and ministry where he tried one way and it wasn't working, and now he decided to do this. And as soon as he did it for the first time, his disciples were like, what's up? What's up? Why did you do this? Why are you talking to them? Notice, this is for the crowds, not for his disciples. He continues to teach the disciples didactically, but this is for the crowds. He says, why are you telling them parables now? And so then he explains the parable, which is about the moment, right? The parable is about parables, about why he decides. And he's saying, look, we've faced all this rejection. People aren't getting it. So I'm going to just tell them these stories from now on. That's how we're going to that's how we're going to go on. And there's a lot of reasons for that, right? He tries to explain it by saying, using Isaiah and saying that Isaiah had prophesied this moment by saying there's going to be a time where people who should hear the message can't hear it because this generation is dark and dim-witted, or whatever. They're dull, they're hard-hearted, they can't listen, they're not going to receive this. So he's kind of explaining rejection, theologizing about it, saying, look, failure is going to come, people aren't going to get it. That's part of that's nothing to worry about, no big deal. It was prophesied in Isaiah, we're good. But now I'm going to talk to them in parables because of that. Now you might say, well, why? Again, I mentioned this. Why did he make it more confusing? Why did he make it more obscure? You could say a lot of things. One of my reasons for that, I didn't talk about this in this particular sermon, but I think Jesus was trying to stay alive longer. I think he realized the resistance was heating up to a point that he was close to getting killed earlier than he really accounted for because of how resistant people were to his message. And so he said, my stuff on earth my time's not up. I got more to do, more to say, and I got to survive longer. So it's kind of like why Revelation is so confusing. It's written in code, right? It's written in code so you could carry it around in your pocket, and if you got stopped by a Roman soldier and they pulled it out, they'd be like, what is this thing about dragons? I don't know about dragons, but we know, the people of faith know what we mean by dragons and beasts, right? It's coded. It's like a secret message carried around so that you don't get in trouble. And that's what the parables start to be. He says, I'm not going to do it straightforward anymore. They can't hear it when I come at it straight. When I just tell it to them plain, they shut down or they try to kill me. Those are their only responses, right? They try to throw me off a cliff. They try to get me in trouble. They try to capture me, imprison me. So I'm just going to tell them parables from now on. And you see that sort of pattern play out all the way, even to the very end. Matthew 25, Jesus is still telling parables. Even in the temple, minutes before he gets arrested, days before he gets arrested, he's still telling them parables about the sheep and the goats, right? When did you see me sick or thirsty or hungry? That's one of the last ones that he tells. So I thought that moment of Jesus changing his mind, that really gave me what I needed for the sermon. The other thing that helped me this week was to think through, to spend time on the seeds and not on the soil. Yeah. Most of the time when I hear this preached, there's a lot of time spent on the soil. All the thorns and the birds and the evil and the lures of wealth and all that stuff. I've certainly preached on wealth before, so you've heard that message. I thought it would be more important to think through the seed and what is a seed, and so that kind of animated and the kind of stories I told. Yeah,
I love that. I love that you mentioned how you started from a place of the average listener at that time, right? So what we learned in seminary is that to put it in its socio-historical, economic context. I also had the privilege of a peer who did a similar analyzing of the text from their context of being from a farming community, right? I believe they were in Nigeria, and they don't focus on the soil or the seed, they focus on the sower, right? Who has the grace, who knows what could happen and still gives equally to all. Blew my mind. That is not how I grew up hearing this text. So I love that you were looking for that edge, that something for us to kind of sink our teeth into and stick with. So, and that leads kind of to the next question I have. Some of the points you were making about the seeds is that, we know, and a farmer would know, that for every, couple hundred seeds, only a few will actually mature and grow into something. And we can have that same kind of hope, in a sense, if you will, that for all the labor we put in, something is still going to grow. The question here is asked, so how do we make sure we don't fall prey to this idea that someone else will do it, right? Getting so much hope in, I don't get it, I don't know, someone else will do it, they'll be the seeds, so I don't have to. How do we make sure we don't fall prey to that in your thoughts and mine?
Yeah, that's an interesting, I guess if that's sort of a cynical way of looking at the fact that 25%, according to Jesus, or the only 25% get it. You could say, well, maybe I'm not in the 25%, so who cares, right? That's kind of a cynical way. I think everybody wants to be in that, should want to be in that 25%. If you're a follower, right, you should be saying, and I think, yeah, I mean, Jesus is pretty clear here. Nobody's going to do it for you. One of the, we Christians tend to operate like the guy in that story that keeps praying for God's intervention and watches the boat go by and the car go by and the helicopter go by, and it's like, why did I die? And God says, I sent you a helicopter, I sent you a boat, you didn't take any of them. We're sort of like that, not just in needing help and salvation and rescue, but in saying, okay, somebody needs to do something about this problem I see in the world, in the church, in my family, in my community, in my neighborhood, and somebody needs to do something about it. Somebody, right? And we just keep saying somebody, and then we'll call somebody and say, hey, are you going to go out there and do something about that? Instead of just doing it ourselves, taking the responsibility, and saying, oh, it's going to be me. I'm going to be no one else can do it, right? That happens a lot in church, right? We sit back and we'll say, I see something wrong with how they're doing that. And so I'm going to call the chair of deacons about it, Well, we need people to help us fix the problem. We can't just fix all the problems. It doesn't work like that. And so if you're not willing to roll up your sleeves and get involved, and you just want to kind of complain from the sidelines, that's not super helpful to us. We got a pile of people who are already got their sleeves rolled up that are trying, and they need help, So it's like, take the responsibility and do it. I think it's a good message in there. Yeah.
Jesus already told us the harvest is plentiful, the laborers are few.
The laborers,
right?
Yeah.
That doesn't mean someone else can do it, but it means you need to get up and start doing it
That's
too.
right. Yeah.
Excellent. So someone else made more of a comment than a question, but maybe you can expound on it a little bit. They noticed, unfortunately, that they had a friend who died this week, but their proclamation was that person was and still is a seed in their lives. And they said, thank you for that. They were fighting with the disease of dementia. But maybe you can talk to us a little bit about those ancestral connections, or what it means for an impact of someone's life when we think about this idea of being a seed.
Yeah, I mean, I think that most of us are here because somebody else, was a seed for us in our life. Planted the seed of an idea in our minds, planted the seed of encouragement, love, care, growth for us. And a seed that helped us grow, right? And they were seeds for us. And everybody has those people. We can look back through our lives. Maybe it's our parents. For some of us, it's not our parents. So we have mentors. I was thinking about this. I was at the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship annual gathering in Atlanta, and we were there talking about confronting whiteness. And one of my very first mentor I ever had in ministry at the tiny little Southern Baptist church in Raleigh, where I started and got ordained at a Southern Baptist church, if you can believe it. They didn't know what they were doing. But anyway, I was a beneficiary of their nurture. So this very conservative church, I disagreed with what they believed then, and I disagree even more now than I did back then. And this pastor, his name is Lane Wallace. He's the pastor of that church. He hired me as his, as a youth minister. And he and I, to this day, we could not have different theology. And back then, we had very different theology. And we could not have different politics. We were on the opposite side of every political issue you can imagine. But he taught me how to be a pastor and poured into my life and showed me what to do when somebody dies, how to go to their house and sit with them, and taught me how to do a funeral and do pastoral caregiving, taught me how to preach, gave me my first chance to preach as a minister in that church. They've invited me back. I've gone back and for homecoming and that kind of thing. Sometimes it's not, the people you remember sometimes are all those that you still agree with now, or that are still in your life in the same way that we were. But I sometimes want to look back at the people who planted a seed and give gratitude, even when I don't agree with anything that they believe, but they still had something for me back then. I had I had in my public school in Kannapolis, I had a Bible teacher. They had Bible as an elective in Kannapolis. It's crazy. They shouldn't do that. But anyway, I had a Bible teacher in Kannapolis in my high school. His name was Dr. Hazeltine, Mike Hazeltine. Mike Hazeltine was a very conservative man, but he could teach the Bible, and he could make you love it. He made you fall in love with it. And he was funny and had these really great jokes. He helped me. He was one of the people that helped me fall in love with the Bible. I wouldn't be where I am today without him. He and I totally disagree with each other about a lot of things now, you know? And, but he poured a seed. He planted a seed. My pastor at that time, his name was Lowell McNaney. He was trained at, one of those very conservative Bob Jones type colleges. He went to Oral Roberts. He went to Oral Roberts. And so he was, and he's still to this day extremely fundamentalist in his thinking and theology. But I'll never forget when he found out, when he met me and kind of learned my story, he took me to a Panthers football game. And the whole time at the Panthers football game, he did nothing but talk to me about my faith for hours, And you would think that would be bad, but Panthers were losing. Dan Marino was killing them. Dan Marino was killing us. So he just sat there and he just talked to me about my faith and talked to me. And I just thought, wow, like he's a normal person. He sat down with me at a Panthers game, talked to me about faith. You can do that? That's a thing people do for a living, So all those are seeds that I don't agree with anymore. I don't believe in their ministry. I don't think what they're doing in the world is very good. I don't think their politics are great. Their theology is not good. But they were a part of my story. Sure. They planted a seed in my life that helped me become who I am today.
I love that perspective that even the seeds, right, don't always have to be 100% what it is we are now, right, but just the possibility of what could be, or having that different perspective over it. That's great. Awesome. Yeah. So I have one more question that was already handed to me, but we have a few more minutes. So if you're already kind of thinking something and unsure, I'm going to encourage you to have that question ready for me as soon as we read this next question. Can we do that? You will? Great. Thanks. All right. So this question is pretty much just asking about this. You mentioned in the sermon about not fearing failure and the percentage rates and the rejection. So just asking, could you go a little bit deeper into the connection you're making there between the seeds and failure and even the preparation for hostility, I believe you mentioned? Mm-hmm.
Well, this is a perfect story that reminds us that we learn nothing from success, but we only learn from failure, right? This is what you could think about the farmer as just scattering, and some falls, and that's all one day. Or you can think about the farmer first starting in one place, and then it doesn't work. And then the next year, going to the next place, right? Jesus, one of the things John Dominic Crossan says, that when Jesus told these stories, they were much longer than they are when we read them. That they were written to be short and condensed. But when he told them, he probably took all day long to tell this story, acted it out dramatically, and talked about it flourishing and embellishing. And so they're very different when they were told in first century than they are now. It probably was clear that the farmer did this multiple years. First year, put the seed over here on their land. The next year over here on their land. The next year over here. And is going through a learning process and evolving in their abilities as a farmer. Learning how the soil works, how the earth works, right? How the seasons change, how deep the seed needs to go. All the things about gardening and farming that are critical to making a successful harvest. So there's an evolution happening. And every time the farmer could have just said, well, I failed. I'm a failure. I'm a failure because the birds came and ate this all up. I'm a failure. I don't have what it takes to be a farmer. I've got to switch to something else. I'm going to be a tax collector now, I'm going to be a sex worker now. I've got to do something, right? I can't farm. I'm terrible. And just give up. And if people did that, right, then nothing would ever get accomplished. We would learn nothing. We would grow. Nothing would ever change. Nothing would ever evolve. Nothing would ever come. No harvest would ever take place. And so there's a message about like resilience and fortitude and keep on going even when you fail, and then learn. Look at how you learn from the failure. And so Jesus, right, the parable is, that's Jesus. Jesus is learning from the failure of trying to do ministry in his first century context and having resistance, right? He's saying, I threw some out over here, and immediately some evil people came and got it, took it away. The Pharisees came in, told them, this guy's crazy, don't listen to him. Off they go. Next group comes in. I threw them some seed. They were like, oh, this sounds good. Then the Pharisees came, persecuted them. They're like, nah, if it means sacrifice, if it means pain, if it means I'm going to be hated, if it means I'm going to be ostracized, persecuted, I don't want anything part of this, I'm out. Next group, throw some seeds out. They kind of get it too. And then it's like, but over time, right, they're like, well, this doesn't seem like a strategy for getting rich. This doesn't seem like a good strategy for becoming wealthy in the first century. And I got to take care of my family, the cares of the world. I got this, I got these 10 kids. I've got this land I've got to take care of. I've got this community thing I've got to be working on. I don't have time for this. I don't have time for Jesus. Right? And the lure of wealth, the cares of the world. So you can see Jesus saying, okay, these folks aren't getting it. I've been telling them the straight stuff. I've been giving them, meat instead of milk every day. Meat, the hard stuff, right? And he's like, man, it's not working. And so he's like, I'm going to make a change, and I'm going to go toward parables. By changing toward parables, Jesus lived longer, right? Confused a lot more people. That's good. And then left stories now that we have that are more beloved than some of his teachings, right? We love these stories more than we love, an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth will make us all blind, right? Or whatever, right? So we love the stories, and because stories are what makes human beings. That's the difference between us and animals, is we like stories. We like to tell stories about ourselves. We make up stories about the world. And so, Jesus figured out a story can change everything. You don't actually even need to get it for it to change the world, right? Think about some of the most profound stories you've ever read. You can't completely comprehend them, but they change you. They affect you. They move you. They can change. And that was the truth of the Jesus story, right? The people writing these Gospels, they already had seen that the world had already changed. The story of Jesus changed the world, right? Less than 200 years from the time that these Gospels were written, right? The world went from you could be killed and executed for being a Christian to you could be killed and executed for not, right? 200 years, right? The Roman Empire went from persecuting Christians to being run by Christians, right? So the story changed the world. Not always in good ways, sometimes in bad ways. And the story I believe the story still has the power to change the world. And so I think there's something really interesting about Jesus adapting his methods, But I also think there's something, the more prophetic angle of this text, the one that we really sometimes don't want to listen to, I think, is the one where Jesus says, people aren't going to get it. Yeah. 75% of the time, people are not going to get it. And so we say, well, what do we do to make them get it? He says, no. 75% of the time, people aren't going to get it. And you need to figure out how to be okay with that. Right? So I hear this all the time, right? To me, that's prophetic. You're telling me to do something I don't want to do. I want everybody to get it, and I want to try to figure out how everybody can get it. He's saying, no, that's not it. People aren't going to get it. Deal with it. Right? He's also explaining his own life that way, right? And he's explaining the church that way, and that's very frustrating for the disciples. And that's why it was frustrating for Albert Schweitzer. He said, this is ridiculous. Who would say that? That's crazy. And so what I hear a lot, and I talked about this in the sermon, I hear a lot of people, well, what are we going to do about these white Christian nationalists? What are we going to do about these, what are we going to do with these Proud Boys? And, well, what about all those, those evangelicals in those mega churches and that are getting preached the prosperity gospel every Sunday? We got to do something about them. We got to do something, Jesus, what are you talking about? They're not going to get it, right? And you'll say, no, but eventually, right? Like the beloved community is going to come and, we're all going to be in the kingdom together and eating bread at the same time, hanging out. No. Some people are just not going to get, the Bible says this over and over again. They're just not going to get it. And some people are not going to get what you do either. In your personal individual ministry of love and justice in the world, they're not going to get what you do either. They're not going to like what you do. They're not going to like the way you say things, how you go about it. People are not going to like this church. That's the other thing. I mean, think about that for a second, right? We think everybody in the city should come to this church, don't you? Don't you? Everybody in the city. Why wouldn't they? What churches are they going to? How boring. Come here. Way more fun. We have a lot more fun. Right? They should be here. I was at somewhere recently. Oh yeah, I was at the Wild Goose Festival Saturday, and I'm going to get a beer. I don't know why. I was just going to get a beer, And I was actually buying a beer for our intern, because that's what happens when you're an intern at Myers Park Baptist Church. And the person behind the counter, she goes, "Where are you from?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm from Charlotte." And she's like, "Oh, I used to live in Charlotte. It's great." And I was like, "Yeah, I'm at Myers Park Baptist Church." "Oh my God. Oh, for you, this beer is free, because that's a great church." And I was like, "Oh, you know what? I'm the pastor." And she said, "Oh, okay." And she said, "That is the most amazing church. That's the greatest church. Just love your church, love what you do. Y'all are amazing." And here I'm thinking, why didn't you come? Where were you? You were living in Charlotte. You're 40 years old. We don't have enough of those here, right? You're hanging out for 6 or 7 years. You admire us from afar. You love us. And you didn't come. It's great. Cool. You like us? Yeah, right? That's awesome. That does us nothing. That's no good, right? So I'm not even talking about people who would just totally oppose Myers Park's mission. And there are those in Charlotte who do, right? Straightforwardly, they will tell you they think we are going to hell in a handbag and taking everybody else here with us. Right? That we're preaching a false gospel, that we're giving people a load of bull, and we don't really believe in Jesus, we don't really believe in the Trinity, we're not even a real church. They'll tell you that, people in this city, right? And we think it's about, I'm talking about people who love us won't even come, right? That's startling. And then we say, well, what are we going to do about that? And Jesus says, keep sowing seeds. Just keep sowing seeds. Don't worry about that. You don't have time to worry about that. You don't have time to worry about the 75% of people who don't get it. Look at what's going to happen with the 25% that do get it. You're not going to have time, because to actually harvest the 25%, it's going to take all your time. 30, 60, 100-fold. If that's true, you're not going to have time for 75% of people who don't get it. You need to be investing in the people who do get it. Those are the people that are going to make the difference. They're the people that are going to grow the church, build the future, be here 25, 35 years from now. So I think that's a really, it's an important message for us, because we'll say, well, what about the folks that don't get it, who don't like us, who are mad at us, who are upset about what we're doing, who don't like things? We don't have time for that. We don't have time for that. We got to invest in the people who do, the 25% who get it. That's where we need to spend our time and our energy, right? Bring in that harvest. The laborers are few. Where are the laborers, right? So, yeah. That's a tough one. People don't like that one. People don't like that one. What are you talking about, Jesus?
It is. See, but that's when Jesus was still a straight shooter and said, "Enough for today's worries for today." Right?
That's right. Let's move on.
Let's move on. Okay. All right. We have time for an audience question. Yep.
All right.
I'm coming.
Here we go.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Where are they? Where are all those people out there? I'm not going to worry about them. I'm going to worry about the ones that are in here.
There you go.
Because, number one, God said many are called, but only a few are chosen.
Yes.
So welcome, few chosen, because remember who you are. You are a seed. But I'm so glad that you spoke on that subject. And as you were saying, it was kind of irrelevant, because people don't think about seeds often, but I do. Because I have so many children, and I have so many grandchildren and great-grandchildren. I'm like, oh, good gravy. So I must be a seed that blossomed. And then from that one verse that I was thinking about in the Bible, where it indicates God said, was it Genesis 1:11? He says, and it's so prevalent, it's not irrelevant at all about the seeds, because God said, I have given you every seed upon the face of the earth. To you it shall be for your meat. The seed that contains the fruit tree a tree that contains itself. So it's embryonic, so it can't be irrelevant. So I'm so glad you spoke on that, because then I wonder about Cain and Abel, the sons of Adam and Eve. And when they sinned, disobedience, they sinned against God. And I want you to address this for me, because when they sinned, they had their first child. I don't think that there's no young people in here. I don't think they cohabitated. I think they created the seed of sin, which was their son Cain, that became the first homicidal maniac. He killed his brother. So to me, I'm wondering about that. I think that he was a seed of sin. That's all I'm wondering.
No, it's a good question.
I want you to answer that.
That's a great question.
Excellent.
What you've given me the opportunity to do is to say something I think is really important about the Bible itself. It's not just that Jesus told parables. Jesus' life is a parable.
That's right.
And each of the Gospels is a different version of that parable. The whole Gospel is a parable. Each Gospel in itself is one parable. And then there are parables in each of those Gospels, and Jesus' life is a parable. But the Bible is filled with parables. And we need to think, instead of using the language of mythology or story, we need to be thinking about stories like Cain and Abel like parables, right? Parables are intended to change how we think, turn things upside down, right? And they were written for a particular purpose. They were not written as factual historical documents like Joe went to the market. That's boring. I want to know why Joe went to the market, right? I want to know what happened at the market. I don't care that Joe went to the market. Everybody goes to the market, right? It's why. So the parable is the why. And so when we look back at these parables in Genesis, what they're giving us are stories to help us understand the way of the world. Why did things get messed up, right? How did things get messed up to where people kill each other? Brother will kill brother in order to get power, get money, get land, get status. Why would a brother kill their own brother, right? How do you explain that? There's only one word for that: sin. These parables become ways of explaining how people fall into evil, why people choose evil, why people sin, why people become that way. Was there an actual Cain and Abel? It doesn't matter. It's really not that important. What matters is that we know the story, because that helps us to explain why a brother would turn on a brother. If you had a brother growing up, you know what it's like to be Cain and Abel. I almost killed my brother many times as a child. Many, many times. I'll tell you one story. This is going to say a lot about me. He's going to laugh if he sees this. When he was probably about 6 or 7, I used to go and hide under his bed right before he would go to sleep while he was brushing his teeth. And I would get up under his bed and I would hide there, and I would wait until my mother had come in and kissed him goodnight and read him a bedtime story and gotten him to sleep, and he was waiting there and he was lying down, he was just about to sleep, and then I would pop out from under the bed and grab his leg and scare the daylights out of him. I did this many, many times. My parents didn't know what to do about it. So he should have killed me for that. I should not be here, right? The revenge that someone would have to take to make up for that over the years. See, it's early on that you learn to love your enemies, but they're called your family. You know, you think that it's about, oh, love your neighbor. No, you learn to love your enemies growing up. That's how you learn. You know, and I think, you know, he will laugh if he sees this, because he remembers that. One time he got me back really badly, though. He decided to cover my entire pillow with Old Spice. And so I woke up with a horrible rash all over my head the next morning from sleeping on a pillow that was covered in Old Spice, you know? He'll remind me about that, you know? He reminds me about the revenge that he got on me. This is brothers. So what do we do when we have that? We write a story that explains why do brothers act that way. Why do they act like that? Why do they do that even when they're older? Why do siblings fight with each other over their parents' inheritance? You know? I see that all the time when I do funerals. It's really sad. people fighting with each other about who's going to get to plan the service and who's going to be in charge now that mom's gone. Who's going to hold who's going to be the estate, run the estate, the executor, fighting with it's like right out of the Bible. That's what the Bible, right? That's the story of Jacob and Esau. It's right there. Siblings fighting with each other over their parents' inheritance. So I think we write these parables come to us as ways to explain our world. They give us meaning. They help us to describe our world. And they are warnings. They tend to be warnings about what goes wrong if you live out that desire of power and control and violence. You can get thrown into a pit, sold into slavery in Egypt. These things can happen to you. So I think it's the parable, that's why we have to work to understand these parables of Jesus, because they actually help us to read the whole Bible, not just Jesus' story.
Oh, no, that's very helpful because, like you said, I think a lot of people want to just throw the whole Bible away because it's not true. Well, that's okay. That doesn't mean we still can't learn from it or heed the warnings that are so evident. So thank you. Great question. Digging into your biblical studies a little bit there, taking you back. Let's wrap up with one more question that I think we'd love to hear to end on a more positive note as well, too, is why don't you tell us a little bit, what seeds do you see as a pastor here at Myers Park, or seeds that we could work on considering future generations, right? What are the seeds that we should be planting, or you see us planting now that, as Paul says, maybe someone else will come along and water, and then someone else will come along and do the harvesting?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the seeds that we think we have seeds in the ground already that our job is to continue to cultivate so that they can continue to grow. Those are the things that are our big ones. Inclusivity, welcome, hospitality, belonging, all that together. That inclusiveness of who we are, that's an ever-expanding. It has to be an ever-expanding and evolving thing. So we till that. Social justice, community, spirituality, those have been the pillars of who we are for a long time. Those are roots in the ground. But we also need to start to plant new seeds that will be cultivated by another generation. And this is harder for us because sometimes in order to plant those seeds, we feel like the things that we love here that sometimes look like they're dying are threatened by the planting of new seeds. And we get scared, it's easy to pick out the things that cause the most controversy. Worship, music, all those kinds of things. But really, I think we have a responsibility as people who've benefited from being in this church for a long period of time. We've already reaped the harvest here. We've already reaped many harvests at Myers Park Baptist Church. Now we have to think about, okay, I want the next generation to reap this harvest too. That means they're going to need something completely different than what we needed. It's obvious now. They're not coming, right? The church decline is rampant all over America. It's getting worse now than it's ever been. It's precipitous, it's quick, it's fast. 4,000 churches close every single year. That was before COVID. It's gotten worse. Pastors leaving the ministry by droves right now. You can read about this, the great resignation of pastors. In droves, Catholic priests out leaving the church. I mean, it's a crisis. We're all in a crisis. We know that. You can look around, you can feel it. What do you do in a crisis? You can't keep doing what you've always been doing. That's insanity. You have to think about what is it that the world needs that the church should provide. Get out of our heads all the things that we once were. Pews and buildings and doors and pulpits and sermons and music and whatever it was that church was for us growing up. Whatever it is, I don't know that that's what the future is. I really don't. I don't know what it holds for church. I've been thinking about this a lot because I'm teaching a preaching course in the fall at Wake Forest. They've asked me to teach on preaching, and I'm going to be teaching them how to do what's dying. And but I can't teach them what they're going to need to learn to do what will be done when I retire. But probably before. I may have to adapt. I don't know. But so for instance, I'm the first pastor, and I'll just show you how fast things change. I'm the first pastor in your church's history to type their own sermons. Everyone else before me had an assistant who typed their sermons. That's the first thing. right? But I have hired clergy who have never preached from paper, but only from devices. Think about that. In the same staff, you have the first who types their own and the first who preaches on a tablet, on an iPad. That's the world we're living in now. It's moving so quickly. It's going from the analog world that we all remembered to a fully digital world that we can't completely understand yet where we're headed, with AI and all kinds of scary problems. We don't know what church is going to mean, right? Church could be a sermon that's 140 characters, a 2-minute clip, right? One song, a 2-minute clip, one reading, and that's it. I don't know. It's really hard to know right now what church is going to be down the road. So we have to figure out, it doesn't mean we throw out everything we're doing that we all love. That would be crazy. Don't do that. We have to figure out, though, that the thing we love, that we're tending, that we're appreciating, that we're enjoying, that's not where we're headed. That's not where the church is going. And if we want to, we have to be selfless enough to say, I'm not willing to let the church die just to maintain the thing that I love personally. I want this place to go on for a new generation. Even if it means that the thing I love has to go away at some point, I still want this place to go on. And we have to be willing to imagine, what could it be? What could the future look like? You all are experiencing it now. How hard is it to get to church now? How hard is it to take the time off, right? We have young people who don't have any time off all week long. I blame capitalism, right? They don't have a day off to talk to their families, to talk to their kids. They don't know their kids' names, or their favorite colors, because they're working all the time, and they have to. There are more two-income families now because they can't afford the prices of housing. They're not getting paid enough. Wages are stagnant. Housing's going up. They're having to work all day Saturday. They don't have time for extracurriculars, and church has become an extracurricular activity. So it's not integrated into their life. No one's asking them where they go to church when they come to work. No one's demanding them to give their credentials of their card of being a good Christian now. Socially, no one cares. What is it going to mean for us? How are we going to make this a compelling thing? What are the things people need, right? I think we have to look at where are they? What are they doing when they're not at work? Whatever they're doing when they're not at work, that's what they'll do. That's the thing that's important to them, and figure out how to meet them where they are and find a way for the church to be there and to be present and to be with people in the midst of those places, because otherwise, I don't know. All this stuff we love, I don't know where it's going to be in the future. It's hard to imagine it all here without some radical change of some kind.
Sure. Quick plug, because it sounds like you've been listening into the spiritual growth ministry meetings, is that this year marks the 30th anniversary for Faith in the 21st Century, also known as Jesus in the 21st Century. And we will be answering and looking at that question deeper of where does the church go from here. So stay tuned. You all are getting a sneak peek. Don't tell anyone. That you too online, don't tell anyone. That is the direction we are looking forward, and the topic we're interested in exploring with some dynamic speakers this year. But the speaker that is here today, we have to say thank you so much, Dr. Boswell. You did a fantastic job helping us think a little bit more about seeds than I really planned to ever think about seeds on a Sunday morning and afternoon. And thank you all for being here. As Ms. Sandra already said before she had to step out, we are also the seeds that are here right now. And I'm just excited to think about the possibilities of where we all can go. God bless you, and we'll catch you next time. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, sir.